Welcome to the Nexus Project, a contemporary marketing conversation with John Ghiorso.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Nexus Project. On today's episode, I interview Amy Luca. Amy is the EVP and head of global social at Media.Monks. She's also an adjunct professor at USC's Marshall School of Business. As you would expect, Amy and I talk about social media, but in a way that's really a lot more expansive than kind of the traditional definition. So, of course, we get into best practices and where the industry currently stands with Meta and TikTok and the others. But we talk about virtual worlds and how they may eventually displace social platforms. We talk about live commerce. We talk about some of the downsides of social and the recent controversies with Bud Light and others. And of course, we get into the convergence of AI avatars, kind of one-to-one communication via social platforms. There's really a bunch of interesting topics that we go down that are all highly relevant for today's marketers that want to take advantage of opportunities today, but also those that want to plan for the future, whether that's a year or two from now. So without further ado, here we go. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So let's dive right into it. Social media, obviously something that everyone's familiar with. It seems like it's more important than ever and bigger than ever. But what's just kind of your take on the state of the nation when it comes to consumer product, consumer services companies? Where are we at in the social media arc? And then where are we going in kind of the mid-future, the next couple years? Where's all this headed?
We're starting big right off the bat. I think, social media, especially in the last 10 years, has evolved significantly. And it's now not just a channel, but it's really impacting the way brands behave, the way brands grow. We are in the era of the social brands that are born out of social, thrive and potentially die in social if there's controversy that's bringing them down. We've seen this most recently with high profile brands like Bud Light that one post, one influencer had the ability to move financial markets. So the state of social is that social is now something that all marketers must take really seriously and not consider it just as a channel, but as a place to find inspiration, insights, and really connect better with their consumers on a more intimate basis, than they ever have before. And I think this is especially, something that marketers really have to think about when, on average, around the world, people are spending around 4.5 hours a day on social platforms and social media. They're getting their news, they're getting their information, product information, all of their activities in terms of media consumption, et cetera, are happening on social. So actually, it's the US's stats are a little bit higher than that. They're more than 4.5 hours, probably closer to 8 a day, which is shocking to think that we're spending that much time on social media. But it's no longer just an activity to see our friends' food. It is where we're getting all of our information on how we live our lives.
So you kind of mentioned this, but I think the challenges of social media, it's kind of this double-edged sword where there's billion-dollar brands that have been built almost exclusively using social media.
Yeah.
There are also billion-dollar brands that have been harmed to the tune of billions of dollars, literally, in market cap because of, I don't even want to say misguided decisions. I think probably decently made decisions, reasonable decisions made by reasonable, smart people, but because of some convergence of events or coincidental something or some small thing happened to go viral, it can snowball and get completely out of control. So, I think it's easy to armchair quarterback these decisions, but I empathize with CMOs, CEOs who are now in a position where they're saying, we got to go into this kind of Wild West environment of social media. We got to go in with some type of strategy, but that strategy, unbeknownst to us, could become a Harvard business case study in like what not to do. And this is a rambling question, but it seems like every time there's a new thing that blows up, it's a different version of a thing that blows up. So they're not even repeating necessarily the same mistakes that were made before. It's kind of some new controversy that you find yourself now inadvertently innovating in. So, it's a tricky world now. These brands are having to navigate. How do you think about that broadly, and kind of where does all this shake out?
Yeah, we've been doing quite a bit of consulting on this side, because I think this is no longer just the social media director, the social media manager's concern. It's now the CMO's concern. It's actually the CFO and CEO's concern, because the impact of one post can be wonderful, or it can be disastrous. And I think we really counsel our clients on going back to the fundamentals, because at the end of the day, we're still talking about marketing. We're still talking about consumer insights. We're really talking about brand planning. And many organizations right now, and what we're really consulting on, is how do you change the organization, the marketing organization, to better understand and leverage the power of social media for good. And a lot of this means moving the social media insights, data, all of the work that we do to find out what's going on in the zeitgeist in social spaces, and moving that further up into the brand planning or even the product planning process. And that is a big shift for marketing departments, marketing teams, and CMOs are really looking for ways to inject that social insight and information further up the planning stream. I think that's the big fundamental shift in the way marketing departments are being designed, how people are working with social content. The fundamentals we really try to guide our clients on is around governance. At the end of the day, the governance around what content goes out is super important, and social can be very reactive, and we can certainly do reactive content, but having a really strong social governance framework is extremely important. Should you jump into that conversation? Should you be a brand that participates in these social issue causes? Does your brand have the authenticity and the trust of their audience to be able to have those conversations? And we call this, basically our philosophy around social intimacy. If you're going to have these conversations that you may or may not, as a human being, talk about at a cocktail party or a party with your friends, should the brand really be participating in it? I think brands that have a historical heritage, and let's just bring up some of the more controversial social issues, LGBTQIA plus issues. A lot of brands have a history of always supporting and being an ally. They shouldn't shy away from it. That is, something that has always been part of their brand DNA. Their consumers understand that, and it's authentic to their brand. But other brands that may not have the history or the authenticity in that space, or the brand behavior to back up what they're saying, should really be cautious about whether they should wade into those controversial issues. Either way, every brand is going to have a moment. And so there will be a moment, there will be trolls, there will be something that's going to happen in social that will test the resilience of that marketing team to hold firm to the values and principles of the brand. And I think, we've talked about the Bud Light example, but one of the other examples that gets forgotten is Nike used the same influencer at the same time, and they stayed true to their values. They said they weren't going to talk about it anymore. And nobody is talking about that today, because it was really core to what Nike stood for, their allyship, the way they approach those issues. And they've been able to ride out those controversies because it's really intrinsic to their brand planning. And this gets back to what I said at the beginning. At the end of the day, social media strategy is brand planning strategy, and it has to be intertwined, intermixed. And that's the big shift that's happening in brand teams and sophisticated brand marketers. They're bringing social further up into the planning, into the governance, into the approval process for campaigns and work they're putting out there in the world.
So that makes a ton of sense to me. Kind of a devil's advocate position on this, though, and it gets into this conversation of quality versus quantity. Mm-hmm. So everything you said, I agree with, but it presumes that there's a certain amount of deliberate action and kind of top-down planning in this intentionally sort of ground-up democratized system. I think, and I don't know if this is exactly true, but I think the Bud Light issue, the influencer was one of, I assume hundreds of influencers across different demographics and different things, wasn't the new spokesperson necessarily for Bud Light, even though maybe it got positioned that way in some of the backlash. But, how do you, I think everything you said, agree, but then how do you balance that with a certain degree of top-down planning that doesn't slow things down or make things so bureaucratic that you kind of lose the magic of social media to begin with, which is you can't plan around a meme 3 months out. You can't react to a cultural event. You can't, jump on to a trend. Like, all that has to be kind of very organic and reactive. How do you balance those two?
It's a challenge. The short answer is it is a challenge that brands deal with every day, and we deal with our clients. But I guess the secret sauce of how it happens is some brands really do need to be reactive. A lot of our beauty brands, it's about being reactive and jumping onto trends and things like that. But if you put the right guardrails in process, and the things we will not talk about, the things we will not jump into conversation with, the things we absolutely want to jump in to talk about are super important. I'll use Dove as an example. Dove and their self-esteem project. They authentically can jump into conversations related to body positivity, supporting other women. There are certain topics that brand inherently has a voice in authenticity in. Where Dove should not jump in is things that has nothing to do with what the brand believes in, jumping on memes or trends in social media that aren't in alignment with the brand purpose or the brand principles. And that's where that planning can help, and those guardrails can help, so that community managers and content creators that are on behalf of the brand or influencers are able to create content within those guardrails that actually elevate the brand. And I think we have to remember, one of the things that I think a lot of times we forget in social media is that every piece of content, whether that is a paid social ad, a paid digital ad, an influencer or creator creating on behalf of a brand, or the brand itself creating organic content, all of those little chapters in this long story that happens over time are little building blocks to how a consumer feels about that brand. It is how they're going to have their recall, brand saliency, all these principles that sometimes we forget in social media because we only measure social on the immediate drug, right? It's that immediate quick fix of, did we get a good engagement rate? Did we get positive sentiment? All of those things are wonderful indicators, but at the end of the day, every one of those pieces of content has to ladder up to build long-term brand health equity. And for social first brands that are actually born, has to result in sales. So there's actually a real transactional metric that is really important. But that transaction is only valuable if people who are buying that product had a really amazing brand experience in that digital environment. And when we talk about social first brands or brands born out of social or digital, the brand experience online, the story they tell, and that brand equity, a lot of times tied with a celebrity. Kylie Cosmetics is a great example. You had 10 plus years of Kylie being on TV, building up a brand reputation. The trust her customers and audience have in her translated into the products. The experience was an all online experience. You didn't go to a store to buy her product. So all of that is actually building and elevating brand equity. So once again, I think, to kind of reiterate what I said at the very beginning, social media is building brands. And right now, many marketing departments have social siloed as a channel. So build a campaign and then figure out how it's going to live on social. We can bring that planning and the insights from the community, from the audience for that brand, the brand advocates up to the top levels of the planning process.
Yeah, okay. That makes a ton of sense. So basically be very kind of deliberate and rigid on the principles and the kind of big lanes and the big themes, and I assume the individuals you work with. But then within that, say, there's some degree of autonomy and, we can
latitude for creativity. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense as a framework. Let's get into this kind of a little bit more, maybe science fiction, although not that far out, I think, conversation, which is this sort of the metaverse, spatial computing, whatever we're calling it these days, this idea that a future computing platform may be accessed through headsets. Meta, Apple, others are kind of working on this. They're putting billions of dollars into it. If they're successful, we will kind of enter in the next couple of years a world in which we're experiencing more of the internet in 3D, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think social media is going to evolve as a result of that? And specifically, and Meta is an interesting example because they're doing both, right? But even Meta, I think, has had some issues kind of translating Facebook and Instagram into like Horizon Worlds. It hasn't had the adoption they would like. But how do you see the social media landscape changing? The current companies, the big players, do they successfully translate into this new world, or they're entirely new kind of, experiences and virtual worlds that ultimately displace them? Again, the caveat here is if we get there. I think that's an if. But in that kind of vision of the future, how do you see social media working or evolving?
I mean, I think we're already starting to see it in the gaming space, right? So these virtual worlds, or if you think from everything from Fortnite into a lot of the games that are being built on Roblox by creators, there is a social currency and economy that's happening within these ecosystems. So I think what we're actually seeing in social media right now is a fragmentation. We have more channels, more ways to communicate, and more specialized conversations and experience they're having, the consumers are having. So Reddit, very different experience from Instagram, very different experience from TikTok, and different reasons why we use those. Consumers and audiences are using many different social platforms for many different reasons. So I think you could probably take a nod to what the future might look like, where those social interactions, those social engagements that are happening in the gaming sphere. I think the gaming industry is probably far ahead on that. And those virtual worlds, as the games themselves become more immersive and there's able to be those social interactions, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of more social media, for lack of a better term, but social interaction, social exchange, value exchange between brands and or consumers in those virtual environments will be richer and more interesting. I actually think the more applicable technology for mass market is augmented reality. I think augmented reality will be more or easier and more tangible. If you look at the success of Pokemon Go, and just how that brought people together in a physical world. And there's still, I think today, people that are meeting on Pokemon Go and getting married. And I think there's Pokemon Go babies now. That's kind of, I think, a more of a peek into the future of how social interactions and augmented reality and these technologies can really change and make it more dynamic on how we have these social media interactions and how brands potentially can play with that.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but it seems then like the kind of next generation, for the most part, these are different companies, right? Like Fortnite, Roblox, go down the list, are not Instagram and TikTok. And I'm not, and I think it's
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. I not to date myself, but I consider myself a little bit of a veteran. I mean, I started my career in 2000, and it's been 23 years of watching massive shifts.
Yeah.
I mean, just even social media has changed everything. That's how we opened this conversation. I think that next wave is coming, and I think a lot of that, and we don't even know the implications yet, is going to be driven by generative AI and our ability to have a different social media experience, a more conversational experience with brands in social through the use of Gen AI technology.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue actually into my next topic, which is generative AI and social media. And this could probably be an entire podcast in and of itself, because I assume there's so many different kind of things to talk about here. But what are the big themes when you think of the convergence of AI and social? What are the big kind of themes you're thinking about?
I mean, if we're going to apply that to brands, what are the big themes for brands? I think there's a few things. I think from a data perspective, what do people use ChatGPT right now? It's usually to find out information. It's a new way of search. It's a more conversational a way of finding information. And I think that functionality will translate into deeper conversational experiences for consumers and the brands that they want to find more information about, they need service from, et cetera. And I think the ChatGPT or like technologies, Gen AI technologies for chat will evolve. I mean, we're only in 1.0 of that. What I expect to see is, something in the future of what if the Burger King was able to have a conversation like you and I are having right now. And that is all brand controlled, which is wonderful, but it's also a learning technology that can really inform brand managers of what consumers are actually concerned about or want to talk about, especially in the beauty and cosmetic industry. Having the virtual version of influencers who are using the product. We're already building virtual humans for some of our clients in mainland China is where we've been testing it, but the virtual human, virtual influencer could be a brand character, could be a made up character, could be a clone of an influencer in real life, could be a celebrity cloned. I think there's a lot of really interesting ways that we can enhance the brand experience. I actually, I've talked about this. I actually teach at USC in their business school. And every time I say something like that, I get challenged. And they're like, yeah, but it's not authentic. Why would we want to talk to a machine? And the truth is we're actually preconditioned from childhood to want to have these relationships with fictional characters. We grow up with this idea that Mickey Mouse might be real. What if we could actually talk to Mickey Mouse? How fun would that be? And I think as long as brands are super transparent about the experience and don't try to say it's a human when it's not, and there is a different experience for human experience versus virtual AI experience, I think brands will be fine. The other big area is in content creation, being able to get data faster on what people are interacting with and be able to produce the content faster. We're doing that with a number of clients right now where a lot of our Instagram and TikTok content is initiated using Adobe Firefly and other Adobe products that are generative AI. And we're able to very rapidly prototype concepts, test them, get them out faster than we ever were before because the initial concept is done by Gen AI and then refined by human beings.
So that's all fascinating, and I want to double click on that authenticity question because I it's funny. I was about to ask that same question. Apparently, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I do think that there is in most cases an analog already via a corporate sort of voice for a social media influencer. There is that information you can get it on the website, you can get it in the the packaging of the product, whatever. But for me, my view on this is, the authenticity, the trustworthiness, the association with that influencer carries a lot more weight. I'm coming from a e-commerce background, like the reviews on Amazon carry a lot more weight than what the brand puts next to their product because it's seen as, objective.
Word of mouth, super powerful for sure.
I have no doubt that the technology will be there. If it's not there already, it'll be there in a couple of years to have, completely photorealistic fake people, on whatever social platform talking about whatever they want to talk about or the brand wants them to talk about. But this idea that they're ultimately a puppet with someone behind the scenes pulling the strings, and the person behind the scenes is the brand. Now, of course, we're already in that world because a lot of influencers are paid, et cetera. But there is that kind of cognitive dissonance. Do we ever get to a place where virtual influencers carry the same weight? I know that there's interesting, use cases, but it all is tiny compared to like a Kylie or, someone who has a massive following, who's a real person. Do we ever get to a point where there's a made up name influencer that carries the weight of an A-list celebrity?
I mean, we have a great case study of it right now. Little Michaela is a made up influencer. She's done brand deals for big brands. I think she had a celebrity kiss with a real human being. They've made, a real character out of her, and the brand deals are big. But I think that's probably a little bit of
Who's they in that situation? Like, who's running because I think that's got to be the question.
There's a technology company behind it that's building these virtual humans.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a kind of
it's basically a talent. Yeah. It's basically, think about it like a talent agency that's building, a brand. I think What's interesting, I always go back to fundamentals. And every time we get bogged down in kind of new technology, at the end of the day, human behavior and the fundamentals of marketing come to bear. And what I mean by that is if you look at how celebrity image has changed in the age of social media, no longer can a celebrity make up a persona and have a different life behind the
Mm,
scenes. They
yeah.
will be caught out, right? So authenticity actually matters even more. And you look at most famous new athlete to the American shores is Lionel Messi. And why is he marketing gold? Why is he getting a premium? Yes, he's one of the best soccer players in the world or football, but he has a really amazing personal image and he has a great message and his behavior in the real world emulates everything he's saying. So there's a real authenticity to him. That will not go away. Real human beings and authenticity will probably be at a more high premium because celebrities who don't behave behind the scenes the way they talk in front of a camera does get found out eventually. And there's a litany of celebrities that have paid the price for that sort of situation. I do think there will be a place for brand icons that are created as brand representatives that are the voice of the brand. They're the character, the personality. We've seen this for ages. It's fundamental to a lot of branding. Like I said, the Colonel, the Burger King, there's a ton of brand icons that I think actually will become more dynamic, fun, interesting, engaging, and be the best brand ambassador because it brings to life everything that the brand embodies. Social media influencers will not go away. However, I think if you look at like a Kylie Jenner, for instance, the ability to have her virtual twin that you get to have a conversation with that has the knowledge of her or the image she's trying to portray will be very compelling for young people who want to go and say, hey, Kylie, what is the color you're wearing, to the Met Gala next year? Like, what's the lip color you're going to wear? And they can talk directly to Kylie. And that is brand engagement at scale, which we cannot do today, right?
Yeah.
Today, we rely on human community managers. We rely on maybe some chat functionality, but that's the future is that personal conversation at scale. And by the way, all of those conversations, they're being recorded. That's data.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing data. And Kylie can come back and ask her consumers questions with her virtual self. So these are the things that I think are really exciting for marketers and for consumers because they can get access to information in a much more conversational way. And marketers can figure out ways, with permission, of course, to get information from their consumers to help with product development or potentially a new store location or all of these things that we take guesstimates on now that we could actually get real, tangible, live focus group information from consumers at scale by using generative AI and virtual identities for the brands.
Yeah, those are both really fascinating use cases, and I think what ties them together is they're both grounded in already kind of real. I mean, Mickey
Yep.
Mouse is not real, but pre-existing IP, where you're sort of creating a new way to engage with IP.
Mickey Mouse is real when you go to Disneyland. When you walk down
Yeah,
Main Street Disneyland, Mickey Mouse is real. Like, what
that's
if that
fair.
experience went into social and digital? I mean, it's, Mickey's real.
Yeah, no, I think that is a much more compelling vision of the sort of virtual influencer, if you want to call it that, than the sort of generic looking model with a name that you've never heard of that's selling soap. Like that to me never felt like that was really going to go anywhere. But what you just described seems really powerful. So that's awesome. Should we go to rapid fire?
Sure, let's go rapid fire.
All right, cool. Okay, here we go. So in a business context, what do you believe deeply that most people disagree with you on?
I'm a very big believer that social planning and social insights have to be at the CMO level and even the CEO level. And I think there's not quite agreement on that yet, but I think they're coming along based on recent press and social media issues.
Yeah, my guess is the last 6 months they've gotten a lot closer to that. But
Yes.
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, next up, 5 years from now, what emerging platform will business leaders regret not paying more attention to now?
I think actually looking at the way, and to speak to Elon Musk, looking to China and looking at super apps. I think this concept of a super app, whether Elon's going to be able to achieve it or not, we'll see. Time will tell. But I think the apps and the technology that will change our lives, of course, Gen AI, but that'll be infused into what we will in the future know as a super app, which does a lot more for us than our current app ecosystem. And what I mean by that is vertically integrated everything. One of the big challenges in Western social media right now is we're not vertically integrated. You have to do a separate payment system, a separate e-commerce cart system, the shipping, all of that in China is completely integrated. It's super easy. And I think we'll look to China to see a little bit of the innovation that hopefully will end up in Western platforms.
So if you had to pick one or two winners, are they existing companies that you think will pull it off? Or are they kind of net new things that don't exist yet?
I would put my bets on TikTok. I think TikTok, we see it in mainland China. We know what they're capable of from a technology perspective. I think they already have a lot of this built. It just isn't implemented in the US and Western markets. I would keep an eye on TikTok. Probably the sleepers are the payment platforms. So the Venmos, PayPal, they're sleeping giants because they've got a lot of purchasing power and consumers. Venmo peer-to-peer payments is huge and massive. So I think definitely looking at them for where they may take things in the future. And I think Roblox, there was a lot of conversation about it about 2 years ago. And I think it's a sleeper. I think it's coming up. I think it's building an audience. It's building a whole new generation of the way Gen Z is interacting with games and social, et cetera. So yeah, I have high hopes for Roblox and those technologies.
That was a really good answer. I have so many follow-up
What do you
questions.
think? Yeah, I'm curious what you think.
I agree with the TikTok thing. I could see TikTok buying Shein or Temu or merging with them. And there you've kind of at least two big parts of the super app right there. And they're both Chinese companies.
Yep.
I think that could.
But what's interesting about Shein is that Shein actually just did a deal with Forever 21.
Yeah, I saw that.
They're going from e-commerce into physical retail. They're going to put Shein stores within Forever 21. So one of the massive trends we're seeing right now is these social or digital brands coming after the footprints of big established traditional brands. Traditional brands on the shelf at Target losing shelf space now to social first digital brands that were only direct to consumer e-commerce. So the brandscape's changing pretty rapidly, and that's all being driven by social. Because all of these brands have direct relationships. They have first party data. They know where their consumers are because they've got that first party data, and they know how to make strategic investments into storefronts. I always laugh because our Media.Monks offices, we have two of them in Venice, California on Abbot Kinney. And Abbot Kinney, if you look at Abbot Kinney, and I lived on Abbot Kinney 20 years ago, what Abbot Kinney storefronts were then versus today, I always say it's the street of Instagram brands. You walk down that street and every one of those brands is an Instagram brand. They're all born on Instagram or are thriving through social media. So the brandscape is changing very rapidly, not just in cosmetics or fashion, but it's changing in everyday products, which is just pretty interesting.
Yeah. I totally agree. The other part of your answer, the Roblox thing, it's interesting how much Roblox has come up in a conversation around social media. Like, I just think that is an interesting phenomenon. And I am, from the outside looking in, equally bullish on that company. Yeah. I see these kind of interesting parallels with like what I saw with Amazon 15 plus years ago, where it's like, this is the thing now, but the thing it could become if the team kind of pulls off their pretty clearly articulated vision is one of the most important technology companies.
They have captured the imagination, the creativity, and the social connection of the next generation.
Yeah.
That's super powerful.
Yeah.
And that generation is going to drive the innovation and the creativity for older generations too. So I just think I'm really bullish on anything that is creating an ecosystem for collaboration, creation, and, gaming and games are a great way for that to really spread. I'm bullish on Roblox. I do think that you're going to find that TikTok and some of these other Twitter or X, as we're calling it now, they're going to turn into more entertainment platforms. So I think you're going to see some convergence too of they're going to give Netflix a run for their money. They're going to give all the streaming platforms a run for their money because they're going to start to become live entertainment platforms. As a matter of fact, right now we have for Google Play Live, we're running a live event. Actually, literally while this podcast is being recorded, we're doing a live commerce event. And that live commerce piece is going to be a real part of, it's big in Asia already, just hasn't hit the Western world yet. But that live commerce, think of QVC on steroids. We'll find a home and a voice and social platforms. And, there's no reason why that can't live inside of Roblox. Why not? Why can't that live there?
For me, it's always like, well, what's the next one? What's the next Meta, Amazon? Go down the list of the big guys. And I just think Roblox is one of the few that they have the ambition and the potential sort of impact to become one of the next big FANG companies. But
I think the reason why Roblox, just like the App Store was big for Apple, there's self-interest involved. Because actually, same why YouTube blew up with YouTube creators, the community actually can benefit. They can make money on it. When there's self-interest of the community to help it grow because it actually personally benefits them, I think it's a winning combination. We've seen it happen over and over again.
Yeah. At some point, they're just creating the structure around and like the incentives for the
playground.
community.
They're creating the playground where everyone comes to play, and it's an exciting proposition. I'm really keen to see what they do in the next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. One more thing you mentioned I want to follow up on, the US versus China live commerce thing. There are some, I think, really credible takes on both sides of this, and the two kind of prevailing opinions seem to be what happened in China will happen in the US. It's only a matter of time. The second opinion is kind of the opposite of that, which is China's too different. It's too unique culturally, business landscape, everything else. It's a phenomenon that will stay in China and will never really take off, at least at the same scale in the same way. Where do you come down on that?
I think I go back once again to brand and marketing fundamentals. We already have it here. It's just on TV. It's QVC. Like we have live home shopping. We just haven't developed it. It hasn't just found its footing yet in the Western world. And it has to be integrated into other entertainment or social platforms as something that is, programming that's always on. Like I said, the biggest challenge we have in the Western world is we're not vertically integrated. So when we do those sorts of programs, it has to go from a live shopping experience into a shopping cart, into a payment system, into some sort of shipping. There's too many friction points.
Yeah.
China doesn't have those friction points in their platforms because they're all vertically integrated. So when we start to reduce those friction points, I think you'll see more adoption of it. There are early successes in really strategic live shopping events for products and services that have scarcity, that have a storyline around them. All the things that QVC in home shopping has done really well, but we have to take it to the next level in social because engagement, the attention economy, we have less chance that the first 3 seconds we've got to hook someone into the programming. And it can't be just hard sell. It has to be a storyline around it. It has to have influencers or talent or something that is bringing in that audience. So I think there's a lot of experimentation going on right now, which is exciting. And I think once the friction points are started to alleviate from a technical perspective for consumers, I think we'll see a lot more of that.
So, I mean, said another way, basically, the super app, it needs to be kind of the precursor to the real takeoff of
Yeah, and I think, you definitely have some platforms playing with it. I mean, YouTube absolutely is playing with it. They're trying to figure that out. I think Instagram dabbled in it for a while, and there is still some shopping features, but it's not frictionless. And, the minute you've lost that piece of content, you got to go back and search for it. So it's just not, as easy from a programming perspective. I think YouTube has a real shot at doing it really well, and possibly becoming that super app from an entertainment. I mean, if you think about YouTube, which is just, I think people forget, YouTube is a social media application.
Yeah, sure.
There's a social function in it, but it's also subscription. It's also all this entertainment content. And it is and can be live shopping, which we're doing right now for Google Play Live. So I think, the other one we forget about too is Twitch and Twitch's ability to really potentially have those experiences as well. So I think a lot of people are working on it. It'll come here. It will be here. Different iteration than you see in mainland China, but I think the fundamentals of the shopping and why people want to view that content will be similar.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, I think we have time for one more. What are the most overrated and underrated trends in marketing today? One or both?
Underrated, I think, cultural understanding and cultural planning. And I think, especially United States, with our changing demographic, really understanding cultural sentiment and not just going after a media demographic, which is what most brands are still doing today. I think really digging into cultural trends, cultural insights, true understanding of, for instance, the United States, I think most brands are not paying attention to the changing demographics of the US Hispanic market and how diverse that US Hispanic market is. It's not monolithic. So, or sorry, it's not homogeneous, but it's one of the things that is really underrated that I wish brands and clients would pay more attention to, because when done well, it's killer. It's amazing. You really connect with consumers. You have a really great differentiated message, and the brand really feels like they are listening to the social media audience because they're really tapping into culture. And by culture, I don't mean memes and trends. Those are very tactical. I mean
Deep
real
rooted
cultural, deep
values, principles.
understanding of how culture is impacting society and the trends that are happening. So, real true cultural understanding applied to social and brand planning is a secret weapon that really great brands understand.
That's awesome. This has been fantastic, Amy. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Project. If we referenced anything in terms of links, etc., they should be in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe so you get all the episodes in your feed. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating or review, that would be super helpful. Last but not least, share this with a friend or a colleague that you think might get value out of it. And I will see you on the next episode.